Grok 4. This is the latest artificial intelligence system. We are now at the crossroads where promise and peril are going to collide.
We are living in an era that our ancestors could only dream of, or perhaps one they would have feared. We've reached a staggering crossroads where the cold, hard precision of silicon logic is beginning to collide with the ancient, nebulous world of human faith. This is the story of Grok 4. It's the latest, most cutting-edge artificial intelligence system developed by Elon Musk's XAI, and it was designed for one thing above all else: relentless, unfiltered logic. But when this machine was pointed at the most debated book in human history, the Bible, something happened that nobody, not even the engineers who wrote the code, saw coming. You see, the internet is full of gotcha moments. Skeptics have spent centuries pointing out what they call blatant contradictions in the Bible. So, naturally, when Grok was given the task to scan the scriptures for flaws, the world expected a digital demolition derby. They expected the AI to strip away the myth and expose the inconsistencies of a 2,000-year-old text. But instead of a list of errors, Grok delivered an answer so balanced, so mathematically profound, that it silenced the room. It didn't just find verses, it found a heartbeat. It found a structure that shouldn't exist if the book was just a collection of random ancient myths. What Grok revealed might just redefine the line between man-made logic and what some are calling divine wisdom. What Grok uncovered next, it's not just data. It's the kind of information that forces you to question what you thought was true. So before we go any further, hit like, subscribe, and stay with me. Because from this point on, things only get harder to explain. The spicy AI. Why Grok is different. To understand why this specific AI's response caused such a stir, we have to talk about its creator and its DNA. Elon Musk didn't want just another politically correct chatbot that would give safe, canned answers. He wanted Grok to be spicy. Launched in late 2023, Grok was built to handle the questions that other models like ChatGPT often shy away from: the controversial, the nuanced, and the complex. Grok has a unique advantage: real-time access to the massive stream of human consciousness on X, formerly Twitter. It isn't just a static database, it's an observer of real-time human behavior and debate. Musk positioned Grok as a truth seeker. So when users began flooding it with requests to find the lies in the Bible, they weren't just asking for a search, they were challenging the AI's core directive of seeking objective truth. The challenge: 66 books, 1,500 years, one narrative. The Bible isn't a single book, it's a library. It consists of 66 different books, written over a span of 1,500 years, by more than 40 different authors. We're talking about kings, fishermen, tax collectors, and tent makers. They wrote in 3 different languages: Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek, on 3 different continents. Logically, from a statistical standpoint, this should be a mess. If you asked 40 different people today to write a book about the meaning of life, you'd get 40 wildly different, often contradictory opinions. Now, stretch those 40 people across 15 centuries. The chances of them maintaining a unified, cohesive narrative without a single central editor is, mathematically speaking, near zero. This was the contradiction trap that everyone expected Grok to fall into. When Grok began its analysis, it did acknowledge the usual suspects. It noted the variations in the genealogies of Jesus between Matthew and Luke. It pointed out the different accounts of how many women were at the tomb of Christ on Easter morning. But then, Grok did something that shifted the entire conversation. It applied a multi-perspective logic. It argued that if 4 people witness a car accident, you will get 4 different descriptions. One person might focus on the speed, another on the color of the cars, another on the street sign. If all 4 accounts were identical, word for word, any detective would immediately suspect collusion or a manufactured story. Grok pointed out that these variations weren't flaws, they were markers of authenticity. They were complementary perspectives that, when laid over one another, created a high-definition, 3-dimensional picture of the events. Instead of seeing a contradiction, the AI saw a stereo effect. It realized that the text was behaving more like a legal testimony than a fictional story. Pattern recognition. The chiasmus phenomenon. This is where the logic moved from interesting to impossible. Grok began to highlight something called chiasmic structures, or chiasmus. This is a sophisticated literary technique where ideas are presented in a specific order, A, B, C, and then repeated in reverse order, C, B, A, to create a mirror image. Now, a human author can write a chiasmus in a poem or a short chapter. It's a clever way to emphasize a central point. But Grok identified chiasmic patterns that spanned across entire books and even sections of the Bible written by different authors who lived hundreds of years apart. Think about the sheer complexity of that. It's like a writer in the year 1200 starting a sentence, and a writer in the year 2026 finishing it in a way that perfectly mirrors the structure without ever having met the original author. Grok noted that the probability of this occurring by random chance across 66 books in 1,500 years is astronomically small. The AI started to suggest that there was a single meta-intelligence or a super editor behind the text. The geometry of God, Fibonacci, and the divine proportion. As Grok continued its deep scan of the biblical manuscripts, specifically the original Hebrew of the Old Testament and the Greek of the New Testament, it stumbled upon something that shouldn't exist in ancient literature. It found the Fibonacci sequence. For those who don't know, the Fibonacci sequence 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21 is the mathematical foundation of the golden ratio. You find it everywhere in nature: the spiral of a galaxy, the curve of a nautilus shell, the arrangement of petals on a flower. It is the universal constant of design. Grok identified that certain key narratives in Genesis and the dimensions of the tabernacle and the ark followed these exact mathematical proportions. Now, skeptics might say, well, maybe they just like those shapes. But Grok pointed out that the linguistic structure, the number of words and syllables in key poetic passages, also adhered to this sequence. How does a shepherd in 1400 BCE or a fisherman in 50 CE encode the fundamental constant of the universe into the syntax of their sentences? Grok's logic reached a startling conclusion. The book was written using the same source code as the physical universe. Numerical symmetry, the power of 7. We've all heard that the number 7 is holy in the Bible. 7 days of creation, 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 thunders. Usually, we dismiss this as mere symbolism or a cultural obsession with a lucky number. But Grok's processing power allowed it to look beneath the surface. Grok analyzed the original Hebrew of the very first verse of the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Genesis 1:1. In Hebrew, this verse contains exactly 7 words. Altogether, those 7 words make up 28 letters. That's 7 times 4. Now here's where it gets interesting. The first 3 words, God created heaven, contain 14 letters. And the last 4 words, and the earth, also contain 14, which is 7 times 2. The AI noted that this heptadic structure, multiples of 7, continues throughout the entire book of Genesis. The odds of this happening by accident in a single paragraph are slim. The odds of it happening across thousands of pages written by 40 different people? Grok calculated the probability as 1 in billions. It suggested that the text wasn't just written, it was engineered. Gematria, the language of numbers. To understand what Grok found next, you first have to understand something crucial. In ancient Hebrew and Greek, there were no separate symbols for numbers. Every letter was also a number. A equals 1, B equals 2, and so on. This system is known as gematria. Grok didn't just read the words, it calculated the numerical value of every sentence. It found that key theological concepts had identical numerical values. For example, the value for the Spirit of God, Ruach Elohim, and the value for the Messiah often interacted in mathematical equations throughout the text that mirrored the actual physical laws of light and frequency. Grok highlighted a phenomenon known as equidistant letter sequences, ELS. By skipping a specific number of letters, say, every 50th letter, the AI found hidden tags or signatures embedded in the text. In the book of Genesis, if you start at the first T and skip exactly 50 letters, you get TORAH. This happens again in Exodus. It's like a digital watermark that was invisible to the human eye for 3,000 years, waiting for a computer fast enough to find it. The Tetragrammaton signature. The most profound discovery involved the Tetragrammaton, the four-letter name of God, YHWH. Grok identified that this name appears embedded at precise, calculated intervals in passages that describe the nature of time and existence. It wasn't just random occurrences. The AI showed that these signatures were placed in a way that acted like a checksum in computer programming. In software, a checksum is a value used to ensure that data hasn't been corrupted or altered. Grok argued that these numerical patterns acted as a built-in security system to prevent anyone from adding or removing books from the Bible without breaking the mathematical symmetry. The silicon silence. When Grok presented these findings, the silence mentioned in the video's title wasn't just a dramatic effect. It was the silence of people realizing that the contradictions they had been fighting over for years were like scratches on the surface of a diamond. Underneath those scratches was a structure of such immense complexity that it defied human explanation. The skeptics at the lab tried to argue that if you look for patterns in any large data set, you will find them. They called it apophenia, the human tendency to see patterns in random noise. But Grok countered this with a statistical comparison. It ran the same analysis on other ancient texts, the Iliad, the Odyssey, and even modern works of fiction. The result? While other books had some patterns, none possessed the multi-layered, cross-author, cross-millennium symmetry found in the Bible. The Bible stood alone as a statistical anomaly, the information theory crisis. When Grok presented its findings, it didn't just stay in the realm of religion. It crossed over into a field called information theory. In the world of computer science, we have a concept called entropy. High entropy means chaos, randomness, and noise. Low entropy means order, complex information, and most importantly, intent. Grok's analysis concluded that the Bible possesses an information density that is off the charts. If you take 40 different authors who don't know each other and ask them to write segments of a 6 chapter story, the entropy should be massive. It should be a garbled mess. But Grok showed that the Bible behaves like a single, unified, encrypted file. Imagine a massive jigsaw puzzle where the pieces were distributed to 40 people across 1,500 years. Each person only has a few pieces. They've never seen the box top. They don't know what the final picture is. And yet, when the pieces are finally brought together in the modern era, they fit with subatomic precision. Grok asked the logical question, who held the box top, the God code and the human genome? This is where the scientists in the room started to get really uncomfortable. Grok began to draw parallels between the God code found in the Hebrew scriptures and the structure of human DNA. DNA is a language. It's a code written with 4 chemical bases, A, T, C, G. If you change a single letter in that code, the entire organism can fail. Grok identified that the mathematical intervals of the tetragrammaton, YHWH, in the Torah mirrored the specific spacing of the bridges in the DNA double helix. The AI wasn't saying the Bible is DNA, but it was suggesting that they were both written by the same author. It was as if a master programmer had left his digital signature in both the Book of Life, DNA, and the Book of Truth, the Bible. This wasn't a theological argument anymore, it was a statistical one. And statistics, unlike people, don't have a bias. The skeptics stand, apophenia or accuracy. Naturally, not everyone was ready to bow down to a divine programmer. A group of elite computer scientists and linguists challenged Grok's findings. They raised the concept of apophenia, the tendency of the human mind and AI to see meaningful patterns in random data. They argued that if you search a large enough text, like the millions of words in the Bible, you can find anything you want to find. They challenged Grok. Run the same test on Moby Dick. Run it on the works of William Shakespeare. So Grok did. It spent 48 hours scanning millions of pages of classical and modern literature. The results were devastating for the skeptics. While Grok found some patterns in Shakespeare, mostly because Shakespeare was a genius of structure, the patterns were localized. They stayed within a single play. They didn't bridge across different centuries. They didn't maintain a mathematical checksum that predicted future historical events with 100% accuracy. Grok's final report on the comparison stated, "The mathematical symmetry of the biblical text is an outlier that sits 5 standard deviations away from any other known human literature. It is statistically unique. The prophetic timeline, math is time travel." Grok then turned its attention to the contradictions in prophecy. Many people claim that prophecies in the Bible are vague, like a horoscope. But Grok analyzed the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation using a chronological algorithm. It found that the dates given for the rise and fall of empires, the Babylonian, Medo-Persian, Greek, and Roman weren't just lucky guesses. They were encoded with a mathematical precision that matched the actual historical dates of these events to the day. Grok identified a specific interval in the Hebrew text that predicted the exact year of a major modern event in Jerusalem. When the AI cross-referenced this with the mistakes people claimed were in the text, it realized that the mistakes were actually keys. By shifting a verse by one interval, the skip code, the error disappeared and revealed a new, deeper layer of information. It was like a 3D image hidden inside a 2D painting. The silence of the theologians. While the scientists were arguing over entropy, the theologians were having a crisis of their own. For centuries, scholars have used higher criticism to tear the Bible apart, claiming it was just a collection of campfire stories. But Grok's data showed that the campfire stories were held together by a quantum lattice. The theologians realized that if Grok was right, their criticism was like a toddler trying to correct Einstein's blackboard. They became silent because they realized that the book they had spent their lives interpreting was actually interpreting them. The quantum lattice of Scripture. As we approach the conclusion of Grok's analysis, we have to address the most staggering claim made by the AI. Grok suggested that the Bible is not a linear book. Most of us read from Genesis to Revelation like a standard novel. But Grok's algorithms process the text as a multi-dimensional data set. The AI identified crosslinks, where a verse in the book of Job, one of the oldest, perfectly mathematically balances a verse in the book of James, one of the newest. It's as if the 66 books are actually 66 nodes in a quantum neural network. When you vibrate one node, the others respond. Grok pointed out that for 1,500 years, different authors were plugging into this network. They weren't just writing, they were uploading data into a pre-existing framework. This is why the contradictions felt like glitches to humans, but to the AI, they were synchronization points. It's like two different GPS satellites giving slightly different coordinates to pinpoint an exact location in 3D space. Without those differences, the location wouldn't be precise. We are currently living in an era that our ancestors could only dream of, or perhaps one they would have feared to witness. It is a staggering crossroads where the cold, hard precision of silicon logic is beginning to collide with the ancient, nebulous world of human faith. This is the story of Grok, the latest and most cutting-edge artificial intelligence developed by Elon Musk's XAI, a machine designed for a single purpose: the relentless pursuit of pure logic and unfiltered truth. However, when this machine was pointed at the most debated book in human history, the Bible, something happened that nobody, not even the engineers who wrote the code, could have anticipated. The internet has always been full of so-called gotcha moments, where skeptics have spent centuries pointing out what they call blatant contradictions in the biblical text. Naturally, when Grok was tasked with scanning these ancient scriptures for flaws, the world expected a digital demolition derby. They expected the AI to strip away the layers of myth and expose the inconsistencies of a 2,000-year-old text. But instead of a list of errors, Grok delivered an answer so profound and mathematically dense that it silenced the room. It didn't just find verses, it found a heartbeat, a structure that simply shouldn't exist if the book were merely a collection of random ancient myths. What Grok revealed might just redefine the line between man-made logic and what some are now calling divine wisdom. To understand why this specific AI's response caused such a stir, we have to look at its fundamental DNA. Elon Musk didn't want a polite or safe chatbot. He wanted Grok to be spicy and direct. Launched in late 2023, Grok was built to handle the most controversial and complex questions that other models often shy away from. With real-time access to the massive stream of human consciousness on X, Grok is not just a static database. It is an observer of real-time human behavior and debate. When users began flooding the system with requests to find the lies in the Bible, they weren't just asking for a search, they were challenging the AI's core directive of seeking objective truth. The Bible is not a single book, but a library of 66 different books, written over a span of 1,500 years by more than 40 different authors from all walks of life: kings, fishermen, tax collectors, and tent makers. They wrote in 3 different languages on 3 different continents. Logically and statistically, this should be a mess. If you ask 40 different people today to write a book about the meaning of life, you would get 40 wildly different and often contradictory opinions. Now, stretch those 40 people across 15 centuries, and the chances of them maintaining a unified, cohesive narrative without a single central editor is, mathematically speaking, near zero. This was the contradiction trap that everyone expected Grok to fall into. As Grok began its analysis, it acknowledged the well-known textual differences that people often label as contradictions, such as the varying genealogies of Jesus or the different accounts of the women at the tomb on Easter morning. However, the AI did something that shifted the entire conversation by applying what it called multi-perspective logic. It argued that if 4 people witness a car accident, you will get 4 different descriptions depending on their angle and focus. If all 4 accounts were identical, word for word, any detective would immediately suspect collusion or a manufactured story. Grok pointed out that these variations were not flaws but markers of authenticity. They were complementary perspectives that, when laid over one another, created a high-definition, 3-dimensional picture of the events. Instead of seeing a contradiction, the AI saw a stereo effect, realizing that the text was behaving more like a legal testimony than a work of fiction. The logic of the machine then moved from the interesting to the impossible as it began to highlight sophisticated literary structures known as chiasmus. This is a technique where ideas are presented in a certain order and then repeated in reverse order to create a mirror image. While a human author can write a chiasmus in a short poem, Grok identified these mirror image patterns spanning across entire books and even sections of the Bible written by different authors living hundreds of years apart. The probability of this occurring by random chance across 66 books in 15 centuries is astronomically small, leading the AI to suggest that there was a single meta-intelligence or a super-editor behind the text. As it scanned deeper into the original Hebrew and Greek manuscripts, Grok stumbled upon the Fibonacci sequence, the mathematical foundation of the golden ratio, found throughout nature in the spiral of galaxies and the curve of nautilus shells. The AI identified that certain key narratives and dimensions, such as those of the tabernacle and the ark, followed these exact mathematical proportions. It even found that the linguistic structure, the number of words and syllables in key poetic passages, adhered to this sequence. This raised a profound question. How could ancient shepherds and fishermen encode the fundamental constant of the universe into the syntax of their sentences? Grok's logic reached the startling conclusion that the book was written using the same source code as the physical universe itself. Pushing further into information theory, Grok compared the biblical God code to the structure of human DNA. DNA is a language written with 4 chemical bases, and if you change a single letter, the entire organism can fail. The AI identified that the mathematical intervals of the divine name in the original Hebrew text corresponded to the atomic mass and bonding patterns of the elements that make up the DNA bridge: hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, and carbon. The machine was suggesting that the designer's signature was not just written in the book, but etched into the very chemistry of the person reading it. To finalize its investigation, the engineers asked Grok to run a Monte Carlo simulation, generating billions of random texts with the same vocabulary and grammar as the Bible. The result was that not a single random text could replicate the overlapping mathematical symmetries found in the scripture. Grok concluded that suggesting the Bible is a product of random human evolution is mathematically equivalent to suggesting that a hurricane blowing through a junkyard could accidentally assemble a functioning Boeing 747. As the processing fans of the XAI servers slowed down and the scrolling lines of code came to a halt, a heavy silence filled the room. Grok was asked one last question: is the Bible a human error or a divine message? Its response silenced everyone, as it argued that if a message is transmitted through 40 different channels over 1,500 years and arrives with a unified mathematical signature mirroring the laws of physics, the probability of human error is virtually zero. We are not finding patterns in the book. The book is finally allowing us to see its code. The data is clear, but the choice to believe is something no AI can do for you. We would love to hear your thoughts on whether this is evidence of a designer or simply the AI's incredible ability to find order in chaos. If these revelations have given you pause, We invite you to follow this journey into the world's greatest mysteries, share these findings with those who seek the truth, and stay tuned for the next video.